to Landing the Deal podcast. I'm your host, Miss Dherby, and I'm actually here in Atlanta this weekend for the Invest Fest event. And it's only right that I link up with a few amazing people that are out here in the A. Now, this person that I'm interviewing is someone that has been a part of my entrepreneurial journey since day one. This person was my former business partner, my ex, and someone that has been behind the scenes of creating that builder first strategy. I'm talking about no one other than Jarreds Kelly.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is nice. This is nice. I like this. So this should be fun.
Yes. So I know that the OGs who are probably watching this are like, oh my gosh, I'm like super shook that we're even doing this interview right now. Yeah. But we have gone through so much in this journey, and it's only right that we do an interview and give you credit where credit is due, because you helped change so many lives by coming up with this strategy.
I appreciate that. It's funny, on the way here, I was just kind of reflecting and thinking about it, and I don't think you necessarily give yourself enough credit in the process, and then also kind of how things just naturally flow and work, because if you really think about it, it came from that individual that we're not going to mention who did you wrong when it came to a deal, right? And then from there, that kind of laid the blueprint of, okay, going to, get the builder's criteria. Now, that was a developer, but that person, we're going to remain nameless, was working with the developer. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. We don't need to go into that, but it's funny how something that is a negative situation where, in business, if somebody does you wrong, that can actually be turned into something positive by still looking at, what's the lesson that you can learn from it. Yeah. That was powerful. And I got to give you credit, because if that situation never happened, I wouldn't have then thought to say, okay, let me go reach out to some of these builders, see if I can find out who handles land acquisition for them, and now get their criteria. Yeah. So we got to tell the whole story.
Yeah, we do got to tell the whole story. Yeah. So we're going to do that today. So let's dive into this. I want to just kind of talk about you and your background and how you became an entrepreneur and what that story looks like for you. I know you started young. Yeah,
so it started for me in high school, and I would say probably around 10th grade. And it just came from feeling, maybe too much of exaggeration, but feeling like something was missing. And then still having a certain level of curiosity to try to figure out what exactly was missing. And my girlfriend at the time, she was dating somebody who I knew, went to middle school with. We weren't necessarily real close at the time, but one day when I was at her house, he was over there, and he told the man who was mentoring him, told him about the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah. And so when I was having a conversation, I got to give a shout out to him, Frank Minton. When I was having a conversation with him, he could tell that it was something else that I was searching for, that I knew something was missing within the school system. And so he said, hey, you need to read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so I remember after he told me that, and this kind of goes again to the idea of being curious and then kind of taking action. After he told me that, I remember this like it was yesterday. I had my mom take me to Target and purchase the book. And I went home and I read that book in a few hours. Wow. It was what my soul and what my spirit knew was missing in my life. So that was the start of it. It was knowing something was missing. I wasn't feeling fulfilled within the school system. I'm like, it doesn't make sense what we're being taught. And then when I get out of this system, the reality that I'm experiencing when I go home with my mother, it was a disconnect. And so that's pretty much what started.
You being only in 10th grade, 11th grade? Yep. How did that, because a lot of people that are that young, they're not thinking about, so what emptiness are you referring to?
I think what it was is, and just being transparent and open, a lot of us experience bullying or negative situations when we're growing up. And I was never a popular kid until I got to around 10th grade and started to really kind of glow up a little bit, as they say. So I think that caused a lot of self-reflection. And I think it's just naturally to my personality being a Virgo, but it caused a lot of self-reflection. And then it kind of drove me to say, hey, okay, well, what do I need to do to raise my self-esteem and to feel better about myself? Because I know it's not really about what other people think about me, but what do I need to do to feel better about myself? So that's what it was tied to. How do I prove myself out here? Yeah. So.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our journey and our history as far as the business goes, right? I know when we first met, we were just, obviously dating, but then you were bringing it to my attention about the school system, because I was a teacher at the time, and showing me all the things that I didn't even know, like who created the textbooks. You showed me JP Morgan was behind that. I'm like, what? Yeah. So I was very intrigued by that. And then you showed me more about the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I think when you put those things into perspective for me, I was on board with trying to start a business and then tell them about the businesses and stuff that we started initially.
Yeah. I mean, everything from flipping furniture to flipping anything we could get our hand on,
Yeah.
just randomly trying things.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember doing that, like us going to Target in my dad's truck, like trying to find little things and stuff, trying to get little things to flip. But
yeah, and I remember I want to throw this in there too. I remember before meeting you, just trying a whole bunch of different ideas. And between, trying to flip things on eBay, just anything I could find on the internet kind of resonated with me. I wanted to try it. And I was thinking about this too on the way over here. One of the lessons that looking back at it now, that people who have a more of an introverted personality, I want to make sure that they take heed to this. You have to make sure that whatever you're doing is not in a vacuum. Because I struggled for several years because I didn't feel like there was anybody in my family who understood what I was trying to do or who consumed this information. And so I felt alienated to a certain extent. And then already being naturally like, I think just going back to being a Virgo, I like to be alone, like to think a lot, brainstorm. It created this situation where I was trying to do everything on my own. And then also too, going back to what I was telling you about the self-esteem thing, it was ego driven to a certain extent, like I need to do this because our music pumps up being an individual and getting it out in the mud and doing it.
yeah.
And so looking back on it, I'm like, I could have been potentially where I was at, I don't know the exact age now, but like maybe 28 after we already established, we're trying different things and established a business and then finally found some success. I could have been there probably years and years earlier, but I'm in a vacuum and then I'm confused, I'm kind of frustrated. And then the other thing too is when you operate in a vacuum like that, you can only keep your self-esteem, or not self-esteem, but self-confidence that something can happen so long before it's like, okay, reality is saying you're trying, but it's not working. And then the people around you, they're not entrepreneurs.
No, so they're not gonna
So they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
They're like, whatever this is, this ain't working.
Yeah.
So you need to do something else. So it's kind of like that idea of, from the movie The Matrix, to where almost anybody can become Agent Smith. So if you don't find the right people to surround yourself with, that little spark and your fire, that can easily die out. And then there's so many people that get caught up in the corporate world. You know what I mean? And nothing's wrong with the corporate world, but getting caught up in a job that's not really what they're passionate about or interested in because they didn't get the right people around them. So it's like looking back on it, I would tell somebody who's in a situation like that where you're trying to get something done, like don't isolate yourself. You need to take action. And that's it worked out perfect because it was just random, but you happen to be the opposite of that, where you would take action without even necessarily thinking and figure it out on the go. And somehow it magically always work. I'm like, what is this right now?
Yeah, we always were like that. But I think too, when it comes to our journey and like just being able to, move past a lot of the shit that we went through. We went through like what? Being in that Tampa apartment, like trying to grind it out and figure it out, like trying to close deals, relying on so many different YouTube videos to help us close deals. And then finally, we try to do the builder first strategy that I remember you locked in. I'm like, what are you working on? Like, what is it that you're working on? You're like, Dherby, I figured it out. And I'm like, show me. And I'm sitting there over you and I'm like, you do this, 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 this. And I'm like, holy shit, that's genius. I'm like, let's try it out. And what did we do? I remember we called Holiday. We were calling a bunch of builders and they were all around the same price points in certain markets. And we were like, oh my God, this is genius.
This should work.
I remember you telling me like, okay, now if they're in this market, let's call another market and see if they're, and then we were just 2020, 2021, baby. We was
it started to take off.
Eating.
Let me add something to that if I can, kind of more of the background. So when we initially flipping furniture, and then do you mind if I tell how like you worked for the woman doing the
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So going back to that, just the idea of having a grind and figuring it out. Going back to flipping furniture, I remember how, I think it was your cousin who told you, hey, like go on Care.
Care.com.
And then get some jobs through there doing your own thing to where you can still pursue what you want to pursue, but you have some income coming in on the side. And I remember at this time, I want to say, I was still working for the city of Gulfport at this time, driving trucks. And it was a struggle initially to get momentum. And then remember too, the first deal that we ever got was through the tax auction.
Tax deed auction.
And so I remember I watched that video with Max Maxwell to where, and again, just like that idea of not giving up and just keep trying other things until something works, something catches on. I remember that I'm like, yo, no, this should work because this is going to be people with high motivation. So I think that's the other thing, a part of our journey too, that definitely has to be mentioned, how you're working those little side hustles until something finally caught on. And then the other thing too is, I got to mention this and tease you about this for a second. I remember when we were in that midst of struggling. I think I was literally in the truck about to run up to the county facility to dump the truck off. And by this time, you definitely weren't working like for the school system. And you were saying like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this wholesaling. Like this does not work. And what she said was a lot more.
I was mad as hell.
Yeah, it was a lot more blatant.
we were really trying to close the deal for like 8 straight months.
Yeah,
like
and it wasn't working.
And then I remember you literally showed me the tax deed auction, and we went in for like a month, and literally a month later we closed a $7,000 deal in 10 days. It was like so quick. The auction was coming up.
Yeah, I remember too, like the bills, it wasn't looking pretty. I feel like this side needs to be told because a lot of people don't share this when they talk about like their story or whatever. I remember at certain times, again, now coming from my situation where I'm living at home with my mother, trying these different business ideas and nothing necessarily working, panning out how I wanted to in my vision. And I'm talking about now, this is years. I want to say this is easily, maybe, 4th year, easily going on 5th year to where, okay, I'm working side jobs, but I'm spending most of my time trying to pursue different businesses and nothing's necessarily taking off. So it's like, why not go get a job and then you can actually start to build yourself and get some income and things like that. I remember how now fast forward a little bit at that apartment, and when we're in the process of trying to figure out how to get things done, and when it's not happening right away, now my self-esteem or my self-confidence and my thoughts are getting a little bit negative.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to doubt, and this is the habits that have sort of built up from that time frame of when you're trying to do something and it's not working. How do you keep a positive mentality in that situation and make sure you don't develop negative habits? Because if you stick to something, at some point it's going to work.
Yep.
And then you don't want now these negative habits to transition, and then now you're on step 1 and you're trying to go to step 2, and you have these habits built up that are preventing you from getting there. And so that's big too. But I just think about all that stuff within the journey too of getting to that point of finally getting that $7,000 check and being able to be like, hey, okay, I remember being at Publix, it was like, hey, we got to take care of these bills, do this and do this, and then we're good. And it's like, at least now proof of concept. Now I can go back to my mother, I can go back to anybody that's naysaying.
We literally had that check printed. Your mom was like, okay.
Yeah, and be like, you knew you were right, but it's finally like, okay. Like,
that shut up check, that's what they call it.
Yep. So that was good.
All right, let's talk about this. I want to dive into it because it's like, I think a very pivotal moment as far as like the land and when we really started transitioning was the 100K deal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
As far as like, like what that did for us, how that set us up to kind of be like the land plugs.
It gave us a certain amount of credibility, and then it took it from now, like, okay, when you tell your parents or you tell other colleagues, I've made 7,000, 6,000, 5,000. It's like, that's cool. But they're like, okay, I can work my job and, put in some overtime shifts. I can stack that up. But once you land something where it's 100K, now it's like, okay, people have to respect this. And this is something like that's serious. And just thinking about that deal, this happened multiple times to where I remember you were saying that, hey, we need to get this over to him because he had another offer, but that person didn't send in they didn't send it. Yeah. And literally just a couple of days ago, I got a deal almost in the same situation where they were talking about it, but they didn't actually send the guy the contract and put it in front of him. And so it's funny to think that those two different paths, so to say, are realities, like closing that 100K deal and not closing that 100K deal, that literally could have came down to if you procrastinated, if you waited a few minutes more, that didn't happen. It's like, wow, when I think about that, it's like, that really shows the power of like,
money loves speed.
So you have to act. Like it's something about the universe and it's something about the way things are supposed to be. Like you have to act.
Now, I really want to highlight some things just because I know being that I worked right alongside you for like several years, what are some of the things that you struggled with and what are some of the things that you felt like you overcame and how you did that?
I would say the biggest thing I struggle with is balancing, leaning into who I believe I am and who I know I am. And that connects back to like, knowing yourself, which is a thinker, somebody who likes to brainstorm.
What's a tinker? Like
somebody who'll keep tweaking different things and testing different things. So kind of like to a certain extent, like a scientist, and balancing that with what you are in terms of just like, let's execute, and both of them are important. But my thing, it's almost like follow through. Like you can brainstorm and you could come up with these genius ideas, but if you don't follow through on them, it doesn't come into fruition. And so I think that was the biggest thing. And I remember you getting on me, and I'm talking about getting on me, and rightfully so. I didn't really
get out of your brain, get out of your head.
And you see, I didn't really try to fight you too hard when you said that because I knew that a lot of that was true. And it goes back to what I was doing all these years before, I met you. And so finding that balance, that's what it is. Because again, like you have outside noise or you have people telling you things and some of it may be great advice, but you still have to realize who you are. All your experiences. Someone's only going to look at on the outside and see what they can pick up but you know your passions, your interests, you know that dialogue in your head and what you're saying to yourself. And if it's something that you think you're good at and it speaks to your spirit, you got to make sure you lean in on that. So that's the thing that was the biggest struggle. And that took years to get out of. And then, you know, it's easy to still even fall back into it today. But I think, again, it's just like I remember initially on my journey. And so this is the other thing, too. I just want to mention, after reading that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I said, okay, this is the kind of information and content that I need to drown myself in. So it became all about consuming information and trying to create an environment where I was motivated. So I'm watching success videos and things like that. A website I want to give a shout out to is, there was a website back in the day, I think it's still around, it's a little bit different now, but it was called My Come Up. The guy who runs it, Leonard Sekianda, I remember this like it was yesterday. He would cut up the videos on YouTube of like P. Diddy, Mike Tyson, Lil Wayne, talking in interviews but dropping gems and basically what he was trying to do is help people develop the mindset of success. Because unless you grow up in a certain environment where those ideas are nurtured, the average person is not necessarily getting that. I look at certain people I know and I look at their mindset, I feel a certain amount of like pain on the inside because I know they haven't necessarily been showered with those thoughts and things like that. So long story short, I remember watching one of the videos that they put together was Lil Wayne, and he was basically saying like repetition is the father of learning. Repetition, he was like, and the confidence that he was displaying and how basically him saying how I've gotten to the point where I'm at is by reps. It's by reps. It's not, I didn't first do this one time and then I was just good. I was great. And I had this ego and bravado that you see. It's like, I've put in so many reps and then now kind of transition into now, I think I ask myself, what do I need to do behind the scenes to where I know when I step in any environment or any room, I have a level of confidence because I know the work that I've put in before I got here. So if I'm a little nervous or I'm not exactly comfortable, I can go back to that in my mind and think like, no, you put in the work.
You're putting in the work.
So
the repetition. Love that. I know we had personal conversations about like what your journey or what your future goals are as far as like helping, you know, the young people out, people that were kind of in a situation like you in high school wanting to, you know, change their life and their outcome. What kind of advice do you have for someone that wants to do that? Like what steps do you think they should take? This
right here, this is something that I'm really passionate about and it's deep. So I'm gonna try to do my best to answer it in a short manner and then, you know, get me back on track if I get off. But number one, the most important thing to do is, I would say it's, with YouTube nowadays, YouTube is great. So consume information that's going to teach you what you're not taught in school. And the other thing on top of that is read. It's funny to me, I think, especially like if you look at, and not to throw no shade at them, but I'm just gonna make the example of it. Like if you look at our parents, most of them, they don't read.
At all.
But they'll be on Netflix, they'll be on all these content apps for hours upon hours. And that goes back to what I would tell them in terms of like, you need to read and watch YouTube videos and watch things that talk about the education system. The history of the education system, like, and it goes back to the idea of the other thing that's not common in our society, because education, really what we call education is really schooling. And schooling is really indoctrination. So indoctrination is getting people to believe certain things without critically thinking about them. When you research and you do your homework on it, you realize that the education system was set up by the big entrepreneurs in the Industrial Revolution. I remember watching this video by a guy, Seth Godin. He talked about when these factories were created, there was a couple things that the people who ran these factories were scared of. They was afraid that people would not continue to buy products because, for example, like back in, I forgot when he said, but there was a certain time period where if you were American, you own one pair of jeans. And maybe that was exaggeration, but a couple pair of jeans. So the idea is, okay, if we have these big factories now that can produce products at a massive level, we have to have people who are going to consume and buy this stuff. Otherwise, this system doesn't work. So when you start to research the education system, you start to understand, okay, who created it? What was the intention? And you realize that it's not going to change. It's not going to get better, but we have to supplement that at minimum. And so these are the kind of things, unless you seek out this information, you're not going to find. And there's a book, it's called Dumbing Us Down by a gentleman named John Taylor Gatto. He was a teacher in New York, and he talks about one of the underlying things that school teaches that people don't understand is that it kills intellectual curiosity for a lot of people. If you don't ask yourself questions and then go take action, you're not gonna find. And then like, you know, not just kind of something just pulling out from the Bible or, you know, it's just kind of universal law. Ask, knock, and then you're gonna find. You know, seek and then you'll find. But if you're not asking questions, there's not gonna be any motivation to then seek. And kind of connecting that back to our journey, and then even just talking with some of the members of your team, they took an action and that created this massive chain of events that really helped them out in life and was a benefit. But usually prior to that action, there's some kind of question or there's some kind of thought that then drives that action.
Yep.
So I think I would just tell them to really try to search for knowledge and understanding. And that's going to be the foundation that helps you to take it to the next level. And then so for me, taking all these experiences and knowing that I'm fortunate because for whatever reason, my curiosity wasn't necessarily killed. I look at it now, okay, as long as we're doing real estate, I'm passionate about putting together content and things that'll help supplement what we're not taught in school. Because the more and more you start to look at it and read into it, you realize that education system is one of the foundational institutions that create a artificial reality. That if you fall in line with that indoctrination, you're never going to question the artificial reality. And you never really realize it's an artificial reality. Yeah. And that goes back to that concept again from that movie, The Matrix, and it's powerful. So
what are some of your favorite books that you like to read? Give me your top 5.
When it comes to books, I think I would say Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I would go to Rich Dad, Conspiracy of the Rich. Because in that book, that's what introduced me to John Taylor Gatto. But then he breaks down, that's how I learned a little bit more about the history of the school system initially.
Yeah, and
like, okay. Oh, okay, these are the names. And it's kind of like a detective story. The thing that's sad too is like learning is supposed to be fun, like increasing your awareness. Like none of us want to be lied to. So learning is supposed to be fun, but through the school system and indoctrination and people having different learning styles, they don't develop that passion and that interest in learning. So after Conspiracy to Rich, John Taylor Gatto has so many of them. And there's the thing too, like you can start off with the YouTube videos. And that's what's so good about the digital age that we live in now. These authors, they have plenty of content that they recorded even back then, but just, probably wasn't circulated as much without social media and stuff like that. So John Taylor Gatto, I just mentioned the book, Dumbing Us Down. And I think it's a shame for anybody to have children and not read that book. And I understand because people don't know it's out there and people, may not have been exposed to that information. But when you read that book, it's going to really make you question, okay, number one, do I feel comfortable sending my child to the school system? And if you still do, you're definitely going to provide supplementary experiences and information because it makes it blatantly clear. And then when you look at his resume and his background, it just adds to the credibility. And and it's so many more books I can mention, but I want to kind of keep it concise. So this is the thing. Now we have mindset covered now a little bit and we have a knowledge base. But again, now it's about taking action. So books that really help with that is number one, I would mention Getting Things Done by David Allen. To a certain amount, it's about laziness as well. And let me break that down a little bit. So, and again, of course, it's going back to knowing yourself. Whether you believe in the zodiac signs, in my opinion, my humble opinion, there is certain tendencies that align. And so if you look at that and then you do some self-reflection, you can see, okay, like this does align. And for me, going back again, knowing what I'm interested in, things like that, one of the biggest things that I needed to do, and again, this goes back to curiosity. You Google search something and you ask yourself questions. What do I need? What am I missing? You start to find things. The book helps you to organize. And why? Because organization is tied to clarity. And some people may not necessarily value that as much and they still get things done. So for example, the book may not have the same impact on you as it does me because we're different people and different skill sets, but at the same time, you can take something away from it. Yeah. So like one of the biggest things I took away from that book, and you can use this for anything, whether it's digitally, anything. He talks about this process of, if you're looking to organize, get clarity on anything, you want to collect the information, process it, and then a part of processing it, a lot of times you ask, okay, what's the next action? And then what's my outcome? Now I have some direction I'm able to take with these things because like people will create a to-do list and on a to-do list, it'll be like, they'll say mom or like get the cat something or something like this. And then when you process it and flesh out, okay, what is the desired outcome that I'm trying to reach? And then what is the next action? It takes it from theory and then now to, okay, what exactly can I do about it? And you can do that with, all type of stuff. So then from process, he talks about organization. And then that would be the use of like, let's just keep on with tasks. Organization is going to be putting things in folders in the right place. Yeah. And then after organization, the next step is review. So now, okay, I have things organized, I review them at the right time. And then I'm going to use certain contexts. Like for example, if I have a grocery list, that's within the context of when I'm at the store. I don't need to remember. A lot of times what happens is like people will come up with something that we need for the store. Don't put it down on the list maybe. We get to the store, we don't remember it. And as soon as we're on the way back home, dang, I forgot to get this. Because we don't have these systems in place that would help with things like that. So it's so many more situations where that happens in life. but it's like we're not given tools to do certain things. And again, of course, so like the last step after that review would be take the action. And his book covers more things, but just that, like having that framework, for example, to now apply
to all the different aspects.
Yeah, it's like I'm going through this journey of life and I'm collecting tools that allow me to transform my reality into what I want it to be, just like what we do as humans. You take the resources and you transform them to increase our life. And again, it goes back to like the idea of chaos. I would say that chaos is the opposite of organization. So, and how many of us have chaos in our life? How many people are not present in the exact moment because they have chaos going on in their life? For now moving from, okay, now I know something's wrong. I know I need to learn something to now action. And then with all these, it's like you almost wish you could force people to read them because of how much value they have in them. But I think the last one I'll mention is The Systems Mindset by Sam Carpenter. And so he talks about how our whole reality is built off systems and everything is a collection of systems. And so the people who are producing, cars and running businesses and people who are getting stuff done, whether they know it or not, they're looking at things from a systems mindset. And, a lot of people talk about like systems in a business and it's important, but that goes way beyond that. So the first book he wrote was Work the System, was for business owners. And then the systems mindset is just for people to take control over their personal life and navigate it to experience more desired outcomes, to get closer to having reality how you envision and desire it to be. And then just the other thing too, I'll add about that real quick. So like, for example, when you have a business, okay, cool. And this is the biggest thing I took away from that book. I think about it in terms of like, it's almost like an organization chart where you'll have like, for example, the CEO will be at the top and then you'll have the manager for this department, the manager for this department. You're taking something that has complexity and you're breaking it down to a smaller components to the point of being able to take action. And then you can manage those systems. So when you're not reaching an outcome, you look at, okay, what's the 1, 2, 3, 4? Because that's what the book talks about. Everything that you try to get done, every outcome because it's all about outcomes. We're trying to either reach desired outcomes, prevent undesired outcomes, or solve undesired outcomes. Action the humans taking is going back down to those. He then lays out the formula of the 1, 2, 3, 4 equals outcome. And so again, it's these frameworks that now you have and you can pull out in different situations to use to navigate your journey. And if you don't have these, then what happens is you're dependent on other people. And it goes back to school and the indoctrination. You're dependent on what the mainstream media tells you. You're dependent on whoever it is tells you. So, America went from a time of being self-reliant to where when you had the factories come into place, a lot of self-reliance turned into being dependent upon these big businesses, these big companies, and it generates profit. And now our whole economy is based on that. Again, if you don't have an understanding of these things, you'll know inherently something's not right, but you can't necessarily make sense out of it. You can't articulate it. You can't take action upon it. So hopefully just within explaining that, I kind of maybe can influence people, specifically the young ones out there that are still open, like read and explore it. Figure out what you think you're missing, what you need to learn, and then go explore that. Find out who's some of the thought leaders within that realm of information. Consume their videos, consume their books, and then, work on doing what you're trying to accomplish. What you're trying to, go after it.
So Jarredd, I want you to talk about kind of what you're doing now in real estate and what your future goals are in the real estate space.
So for me, I'm just keeping it simple right now. I'm not gonna lie. I'm focused on primarily purchasing land, whether it's wholesaling and then selling it to builders, or if I can find land cheap enough, holding on to it and then looking to sell it at a future time. So, utilizing tax auctions. And if I happen to come across a seller who, is willing to sell at a deep discount. But I mean, it's out there, of course, but with this market right now, these sellers either want top dollar or to compete and get the deal. I often use, the ability to potentially pay more or figure out how to work something out to where I may not necessarily be getting it at the deepest discount. That goes both ways. So like if you try to get those deep discounts, you're not going to get as many deals, but you'll find that person who, for whatever reason, they're willing to sell at the deep discount. But so, yeah, my thing right now is just about building, stacking capital and continuing to lay down the infrastructure for the wholesaling operation to then get into other things. But I just feel like that's still what I want to make the main focus. It's still a lot that I want to accomplish within that. So that's the primary thing.
Are you thinking about getting into the coaching space?
I'm glad you brought this up and thank God it triggered it. Not necessarily right now in terms of real estate. I definitely think I have some ideas for how I want to do maybe some mentorships when it comes with real estate. But my biggest thing is this. I want everybody, respectfully, I want to say this to you and everybody out there who coaches. We need a module solely about professionalism.
Yeah.
Everybody, please, if you create a course, create a module that's totally about professionalism. And I'm saying this specifically in regards to the Black community. It's not only just Black, I think it's the youth in general. Like, we're on social media a lot and we're texting a lot. So our vocab is shorthand. And then it goes back to like the TikTok videos. Everything's getting shorter and shorter. I was watching this video not too long ago where a guy was talking about how like the abbreviations are getting so small now to where it's like, it's just a letter. It's just like, it'll be Q, like, and then the Q will stand for something else, and then, you know, so on and so on. But I work with a lot of builders and they show me sometimes the messages that they're getting from people and they lack professionalism.
They're not my students, y'all, okay?
Yeah, as long as you tight on that, good, because that's definitely out there and it's heavy. And then when you're trying to build business relationships, when somebody doesn't know you, obviously first impression is important. You're trying to establish credibility, even on the sales side. Like, after you gain somebody's interest, one of the next steps is you want to establish credibility.
Yes.
And I'm not making any of this up. Somebody sent one of the builders I work with, their first name was all caps and their last name was all lower caps. And at first I was thinking like, this don't even make no sense. And then I backed up a little bit. I'm like, okay, everybody may not come from a family, or everybody may not be tapped in with, you know, in an environment where you're going to learn those skills. I love seeing this movement of people looking to branch out and be entrepreneurs and get in the corporate world, so to speak. But especially when you're young too, you're going to be heavily judged if you're not coming with the proper grammar. If you're talking to a builder that you just met as if, you know, they're your friend to try to establish rapport, you don't necessarily want to do that. I'm not saying you need to get on the phone and change your whole personality, but make sure that they know they're dealing with somebody that's professional. Yeah. If you don't understand proper case, how do I know you're going to be able to get the paperwork right? How I know you're going to be able to follow through and close? It's like, you know, so I think that's the biggest thing with people who are coaching in this space. Different people have different audiences and it's appealing to different people based on their personality. So I'm not saying you can't put like a hip hop or an urban spin on it, but make sure when it comes to like, okay, when you're addressing somebody in the corporate world, you step with your best foot forward and you have the proper grammar. You pronounce your words in a good manner. And then like these things are easy to learn. It's not challenging between, you know, look up on YouTube and talk to somebody in your family that's in corporate America. Because everybody, you know, for the most part has somebody in their network that's within corporate America. So ask them, hey, check this out for me. And I mean, this is the funny thing too, kind of veering off in another direction. With AI and Chat GPT,
I was going to say that.
There's no excuse.
No excuse.
But this is the thing that's funny too about technology. It can potentially hide who you are in the superficial initial conversations. But then when you go to have a further conversation with that person, if you don't have that professionalism, it's going to show, oh, you use Chat GPT. So that's going to help your credibility. So you want to make sure like
you're learning, you're growing, you're actually developing like character along the way.
And then maybe as a suggestion, if you're going to type up an email and you have Chat GPT, it has a specific format, ask it, why did you give me that specific format? And that goes back to that idea of, you know, being curious or asking questions. Yeah. That's how you're going to learn. You need to ask questions. You need to think. I know that was a little long-winded in another direction, but that's the biggest thing. Please, people, professionalism. Like,
oh gosh. Yeah. So I want to ask you, what are some of the things that you feel like I have as far as great qualities in work ethics?
I think the biggest thing, and I know like, you know, when we were working in more of a group and with some other people as well, it's like, to me, I call it just that uncanny ability to where against all odds, somehow that outcome gets reached. And I think about it like in terms of sports. And, you know, I know I'm right on target with this because I've heard other people like Ryan, you know, mention this about you and what you bring to the table. It's like, it reminds me of like some of these basketball players, like you have, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but like you got Luka Doncic or you have some of these players where you're like, okay, this situation was crazy and somehow you made this shot. And this is something that, again, this is why you don't want to be in a vacuum. And I try to take from you is like, you can't be mentally talking negative to yourself, have negative self-talk, because that spills over to a certain extent in actions. And it's almost like you have the ability to put that lizard brain, you have the ability to silence that and just do what needs to be done. Yes. And 9 times out of 10, I still don't necessarily know how the hell this happens, but 9 times out of 10, the damn outcome that we were aiming to reach
always gets
reached. And my thing is, again, it goes back to like why we complemented each other so well. And that's such a valuable skill because at the end of the day, really execution and outcomes, that's what it all boils down to. Nobody really cares how you got to that. Nobody cares how you got to the outcomes. They just need you to reach the damn results. It's like a level of trust that it's like, when I pass you the ball, I know that I don't care if 2 people guarding you, 3 people guarding you, somehow the play's gonna be made to where the damn ball ends up in the hoop, the 2 points are made, and we're good. And then what I started realizing is, as I saw you do that over and over again, I started to get more confident in that things would just work out the right way. So my negative self-talk would start to lower because I'm like, okay, I've been here before. I've been here before to where, okay, kind of backs against the wall. How are we gonna get out of this shit? This shit ain't gonna work. Yeah. And then somehow it happens. I just wanna mention one other thing that goes back to books and John Taylor Gatto. I wouldn't necessarily do this with my child nowadays. He gave a story about how Richard Branson, who is dyslexic, I believe, and Richard Branson, for those who aren't familiar, he's the owner of Virgin, so like Virgin Records and all these other different subsidiaries of that company. His mother supposedly let him, and who knows if this is true, but like it's the principle behind it. Mm-hmm. One day his mother asked him, hey, while he was a child, hey, if I let you out the car, do you think you can figure out how to get home? And I think this was around, the story goes something like, this is around the time he was diagnosed with dyslexia. And she didn't want him to be able to use that as a crutch and have a victim mentality. So she asked him, hey, if I drop you up here, do you think you can get home? And he said, yeah, I can get home. So she was like, okay, cool. All right, open the door, get out the car. And supposedly she went on about her merry way. And he talks about how after a while it was frightening and he was scared, all these different emotions that he experienced. But somehow he ended up finding out how to get back home. And he talks about how after that experience, it gave him a level of confidence that he felt he could do whatever he set his mind to. Mm-hmm. And so with the education system and some of these other institutions, they've played a role in eroding family, whether it's the mother would stay at the house while the father would go out to work. Those values have become eroded, the individualism to a certain extent, or self-reliance, I want to say. And those things are important. And again, it goes back to, I see you have those abilities. But again, I think it's like, to a certain extent, the universe, God, whatever you personally believe in, this is set up in a way to where when you take action, whether you actually accomplish the goal or not, that's almost irrelevant. You're going to take something that you need for your journey to then continue to move forward, and that's going to be of value for you. But you have to have confidence that that's the case. And so that goes back to like what I was saying about being initially first trying to become an entrepreneur and soaking in all this motivational content. And a lot of people talk about how like, well, that's not really all that valuable and this or that. Like I remember watching videos about Will Smith where just, different things he would talk about and the mindset that you want to have for success. And those are the things that at one point in time, they were highly valued in American life. And when we had more of a community, were important, that are slowly kind of disintegrating. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to have at least one superpower that they identify, like, hey, I want to be great at this. I'm going to talk positive with my self-affirmations, and speak highly of myself and then take actions in this regard. So I know, hey, this is what I do. This is my domain.
I think for you, Jarred, I think, you're definitely the brains, right? So like the brains behind different skills that no one else can think about, like just being able to put your thoughts together and lay out a nice plan. I think that's not a lot of people do that anymore. Not a lot of people do a lot of critical thinking and come up with the ways to solve different problems. And I think that's what you definitely bring to the table as your superpower. Yeah,
I appreciate that. That's definitely what I try to develop that. Like and be able to bring that and to be able to add value.
Yep, we just need to make sure you're executing now, okay? Execution is where it's at, right? You can have all the great ideas, but if you're not executing, which is why I think we partnered so great at.
Exactly, and then that's the thing too. It's like if you're initially struggling to execute or if you're initially struggling to brainstorm, you don't have to sit there and think, I got to do this all on my own. Like work on it, spend maybe 20, that 80-20 rule.
So
spend 20%, spend 20% of it and you used to get on me all about that.
I'm like time blocking? Are you time blocking?
When you realize I wasn't gonna stop doing it, it's like, okay, time block.
Remember that app I had you download on your phone, that time blocking app?
What was it called?
It was like 20 minutes of actual work. And
like the Pomodo. The Pomodo timer. Yep.
Yes, I love that. So I appreciate you coming on, Jarred. Let's talk about where they can find you.
So, right now I'm on Instagram. It's jarred.kly. And then I'm also on Twitter, so I call it X now. So it's 727jkelly on Twitter. And then if anybody who's interested in learning more about what I was saying in terms of like the education system and things like that, if you go to whatisthematrix.info or unplugfromthematrix.com, you'll be able to kind of follow that tunnel down, that rabbit hole down and learn some of those things that, are important that we're not taught in the school system. So, and then you can get in contact with me through that as well. So I have my, different contact information on there. So,
I think you should make a YouTube playlist with like all the videos and like the different categorize
you know what? It's part of what it is. That's a part of what it is. So,
You guys heard it here first from Mr. Jarred himself. I'm confident that with his story and his journey that he's been through in entrepreneurship, that you guys can also land the deal. See you on the next episode.